My name is Tebrugge, and I am delighted to welcome you to my alma mater, New College. There's one other person that I wanted to introduce this evening, and this is somebody that 6 years ago was my client, and we were involved in the middle of a very serious trial, and fortunately, he was acquitted of the most serious charges, but he did serve time in prison, and now he's out in the community, he's working, he's paying taxes, he's taking care of his daughter, and it's these kind of stories, which is why we wanted to have this event tonight. So please welcome my friend, Cody Rogers. Cody? At this time, I'd like to call up Dan Boxser. Dan is really responsible for being able to put this evening together. Dan, where are you? Here. Dan, come on up.
Good evening, everybody. And first of all, I want to thank you so much for changing the days from Thursday to Wednesday and have such a great crowd here. Our diversity initiative is very simple. All we want to do is to promote understanding between different groups in Southwest Florida. As you may know, we've had Morris Deese here, the founder of the Southern Poverty Law Center. We sponsored the Beyond Swastika to Jim Crow exhibit at the Florida Holocaust Museum. We've had Dr. Izeldin Abouleish come down here, and this resulted, as you know, people from New College with scholarships for Middle Eastern women. And one of Lean, I think, is here tonight. Do you want to raise your hand, Lean, if you're here? She's outside. And now we have the pleasure of having Van Jones. And I want to thank my wife, Lytton, my partner in all this. And also, I want to thank our mentors, Judge Charles Williams and his wife, Jackie Woods. And now, I'd like to introduce Barbara Richards, the founder and chief executive of Project 180, who we are so happy to cooperate with.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. We, Project 180, and we're just so incredibly honored to be a part of this event. We got a call from Tebrugge not too long ago, and he asked if we would like to be involved, and it's just been absolutely wonderful to let you all know about Project 180 a little bit, people who might never have heard of it otherwise. We are a prisoner reentry program. Our mission is that Project 180 seeks to reintegrate former offenders into community life. And we do that in two ways. We go into the prisons and jails in 5 counties and deliver programs on workforce education and financial literacy using only volunteers, bankers and CEOs from around the community who take time out of their very busy days to go in and talk to inmates about how they can get started when they get out and how they can be financially literate and get a good financial foothold once they're out. And we also work with the public. We hold a lecture series every year in an attempt to build a bridge between people on the inside and people on the outside. Most of you were given a little flyer. That's our lecture series that's coming up this year in April, May, and June on addiction, reentry, and recidivism. And we hope that you'll come because it gives an opportunity for individuals who are very invested in this work to come together and get to know each other and to create a community that is welcoming to individuals who are getting out of prison or jail and who need a lot of help. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Adam, to Dan and Lytton, to New College, and to Van Jones, and to all of you. Thank you.
I want to tell you, I can vouch for Barbara. I met Barbara about 8 years ago, and she had this vision of Project 180, and she has worked tirelessly over these past 8 years, and now we're starting to see it paid off. Project 180 is the only group of its type in our area who is working to help former prisoners re-enter our community. And if we're going to accomplish some of the things that we're talking about tonight, we need to support groups like Project 180, and that's why we were happy to make them a beneficiary of tonight's proceedings. So please pay attention to Project 180. You know, for the past 30 years, I have been part of the local criminal justice system. And week after week, month after month, I watched young men and women be sent off to prison for extended periods of time. And it wears on you. It wears on the community. Here in the state of Florida, as we are here this evening, we have nearly 100,000 people who are locked up in our Department of Corrections. And this is costing us well over $2 billion a year of that money that could be reallocated and better spent on, for instance, providing mental health services in our community. So about 8 months ago, I joined the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida so that I could work full-time on criminal justice reform. And as part of that work, I was fortunate enough in November to go up to Jacksonville where there was a conference called Operation Reform. And there were people that were gathered together from all over the country who are working on the issues of mass incarceration, who are working with formerly incarcerated prisoners to make sure that they have a place in the community when they get out. And that's what makes tonight so exciting. What's exciting about having Van Jones here is not his distinguished past, which is set out in your program. What's exciting about having Van Jones here this evening is not the fact that he's now one of the leading political commentators in the country who's on CNN every night analyzing the election cycles. What's exciting about having Van Jones here this evening is that he is providing leadership in the area of criminal justice reform. This conference that I just told you about up in Jacksonville, Van put that conference on. And you know how you go to a conference where there's a big name speaker and they come out and do their thing and then they leave? Wrong. For the 2 full days of this conference, Van Jones was everywhere. He was in the small groups. He was with the formerly incarcerated. He was with the business leaders from the Jacksonville community. Van has a vision for our society, and that vision includes a more just society where we can make our communities safer and stronger by reforming our criminal justice system. Now, I want you to know, Van's had one heck of a day. It was a little touch and go here for a while, even with the rescheduled evening. He was trying to get here, and of course there were storms and tornadoes and problems all throughout the East Coast. He was stuck in an airport for most of the afternoon, but he really wanted to be here with us this evening, and so he made it happen. So I'd ask you to please give a warm welcome to Van Jones.
I made it. Oh, Lord Jesus. Hurricanes and tornadoes. Wow. I said, I don't want to give a speech. We're just going to be family. We're just going to talk. But it's good to be here. And you know, they had me on TV. I'm sorry, I'm tired.
That's all
so
right.
I'm just going to talk. So, I love Jeff Zucker, because that's my boss from CNN. If he's on there, if he's watching me on YouTube. But what did I say? I love Jeff Zucker. So I said that, right? But I loved him a little bit less last night, when at 1 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the Nevada returns, he decided that we should say Chol 2, and then at 2 he decided we should say Chol anyway. So I love Jeff Zucker, but I love Jeff a little bit less today. But I'm really glad to be here to have a real conversation and go deeper than we can go on TV.
So Van, why don't you start off by telling folks the issue of criminal justice and how you became interested in it and what you're doing about it.
Yeah, good. Well, first of all, you know, probably everything is changing in the country and in the world. Got to start with that. We're in the middle of multiple scientific and technological revolutions that are happening all at the same time. Biotech, drones, smart screens. Whoa, sorry.
Cell phones.
Cell phones. Oh, I'm good. We got that time perfectly. Let me cut this off. That messed me up. I was going somewhere. You see how it happened? You have a cell phone? You too little? What's your name?
Santino.
Who?
Santino.
Santino. How old are you?
10.
You're 10. Give him a round of applause for being here tonight. That's a good young man right there. Yeah. Look, thank you for being here. Look, I want you to, we'll talk to these people in a minute. You're about to be so much smarter than the rest of us. It's going to be embarrassing. Have you noticed how every device in your house you know how to use, but your parents don't? Have you noticed that? Yeah. That's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And it's because all of the different kinds of science and technology have hit what's called an inflection point. So there's exponential growth. So new apps, new products, new gizmos, new gadgets are just coming. And they're accelerating each other. So the people in the biological sciences are now using the people in the technological sciences and vice versa. And it's just going to be crazy. You're going to love it. We're going to be terrified. And what it means is everything is being rethought, except what we do with people who turn out to be humans and occasionally do something that's outside the rules. Now, nobody here has ever broken the rules. But I was born in 1968, the year they killed Bobby Kennedy, the year they killed Dr. King. My father was actually in Memphis, born and raised in Memphis. My dad was in Memphis when they killed Dr. King. I was in utero with my twin sister. My mother was in Jackson, Tennessee, about an hour away. When I was born first by 4 minutes, which means I was born first. Any twins? Any twins in here? So, who's born first matters, doesn't it? You first or second? You second. What about you? Who's the other one? You? That's right. Right. So, but it's important in this story because by being born first, I'm a 9th generation American. I'm the first person in my family born with all my rights. You think about that. See, there's this weird TV station, which I'm not going to name. But I will say this. If you have an uncle, ex-boyfriend, cousin, and their number one news source, the way they get all their information, understand the world, that source is actually named after a sneaky predatory mammal that can't be trusted to guard the hen house or anything else. They might want to just diversify, that's all I'm saying. And CNN is ready for you. So my point is this. On that strange fuzzy mammal channel, they often get very frustrated with African Americans and African American leaders. And say, well, why don't they quit talking about race? That's over, it's been resolved. And it's very hard, I think, in this United States of amnesia to just remember how recent this has been. I'm a 9th generation American. Many of my friends on CNN, they talk about their parents coming over here. I'm like, well, welcome, you know. I'm like, or their grandparents, I'm like, welcome, you know. Welcome to this country. My family's been here for documented 9 generations. But I'm the first one born with all my rights. They finally, Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act 64, 65. That really was the final, stone in the edifice. Of course, now the Supreme Court has knocked that stone out. Despite George W. Bush saying that stone should stay in place, despite 100% of the Senate saying that stone should stay in place, the Supreme Court came and knocked that stone out. So the Voting Rights Act, that movie Selma, you saw that movie Selma? That whole thing they fought for, that bill, the Supreme Court has torn up and thrown in the garbage can. Nobody talks about that. The Shelby decision. But my dad grew up in Shelby County in Memphis. And when I was born, I was the first person in my family in 9 generations born with all my rights. My cousin Kenyon was born before those final bills were signed. Now, I say that to say that this has been a long struggle in America, trying to get to a place where we have liberty and justice for all. You probably have to, at your school, do you say the Pledge of Allegiance, or you do? You're in the 4th grade, 5th grade, 5th grade? So all our 5th graders, it's not just you all across the country, declare to themselves, make a promise to themselves that we live in a country with liberty and justice for all. Well, I took that very seriously as a child. My dad had been born in segregation and poverty. When I was a child, I would go back to see my dad. My dad's family, he had moved us out. But we would go back to Memphis to see his family. And when you're a kid, you know things you don't understand. And you understand things you don't really know. I didn't like going to see my dad's family because I didn't like the smells. That's all I knew. I just didn't like the way that house smelled. Sometimes you see someone go running, I just didn't like that. I was a suburban kid. I went back as an adult. My dad grew up in a shotgun shack. It was a shotgun shack. You know what that is? Every house, the property's so narrow that every room of the house is all the way back out to the outhouse. So my father grew up. He joined the military to get out of poverty. Everybody else was running out of the military. My dad ran in. My dad gets out of the military. He puts himself through college, marries the college president's daughter, my mama, because he had it like that. Then he puts his brother through college. Then he puts his cousin through college. Then he puts me through college and my twin sister. So it happened to me, so I can't be mad at you, whoever that is. And so he had a certain attitude about what life was. And he was very clear. My dad told me, I don't like the liberals or the conservatives. He said, the liberals have it wrong. The liberals think with a child, you can give them something. It'll stop them from being poor. He said, I grew up poor. You can't give a poor child anything that's going to stop them from being poor. You can give them some money, stop them from being broke. But if they're still poor in their spirit, still poor in their skills, still poor in their mind, they'll be broke again tomorrow. You can't give no poor child something to stop them from being poor. Every poor child really has to somehow climb that ladder out of poverty with their own effort so they can stay out of poverty. So the liberals have it wrong. But he said the conservatives have it wrong too. He says, yes, every child has a responsibility to climb that ladder out of poverty with their own effort. But every grown person has a responsibility to make sure every child has a ladder to climb, you see. You can't expect a child to build their own ladder and then climb it. That's not fair. And so I grew up with that. And I grew up with that sense that Dr. King had been killed the year I was born, and Bobby Kennedy was killed the year I was born, and the Hope was killed the year that I was born, and that there was work left to be done. So when I went to Yale Law School, I went there with a mission. But because my father was Willie Anthony Jones, not famous to you, but very famous at 286 Ridgemont Drive, where I grew up, I didn't get in any trouble at all. I was a nerd. Listen, to this day, I've never had a beer. I'm not joking. I've never had a sip of wine, alcohol, champagne. I've never smoked a cigarette. Aspirin is about as far as I've gone. And my dad is dead and gone, and he might come back. I'm not messing with Willie Jones had magical powers that were concentrated in a device called a belt. But you don't know anything about that. So when I get to Yale, I was shocked by what I found. What I found was a whole campus of young people doing drugs. And when I say doing drugs, I mean every kind of drug. Drugs that they had to create to take. And being a Christian, Southern, small-town, military kid, this was amazing to me. I was literally afraid to call my father and tell him about it. I called my grandmother, or as you know, Big Mama. And no black people have a grandmother. We got our mama and we got our Big Mama. So I called Big Mama. And I told her what I was saying. And she said, baby, just pray. She said, just pray. Pray for him. Jesus sees him, just pray. I said, Big Mama, I've been praying for him. She said, well, baby, maybe go tell your teachers about it. I said, they smoking it too. The teacher's smoking these marijuana cigarettes too. I don't know who to tell. This was shocking. And then I said, I gotta get away from these crazy people. So I started volunteering in the community. Anybody been to New Haven? All right, so now how far away do you have to go from the campus to get to the Hoodie Hood? Huh? Across the street. Maybe 2 blocks. You go from Ivy League to where are we in about 2 blocks. And I was shocked to discover there, kids are doing drugs. But there was a difference. At Yale, if a kid did drugs and got caught, they went to rehab. In the community, same age group, literally within eyesight of each other. If those kids got caught doing drugs and they did fewer drugs, less creatively because they had less money, they went to prison. That bothers me to this day. That bothers me to this day. And can you imagine being a 21-year-old kid, straight out the South, having been raised in the church, and my dad had been a cop in the military. He came out, he was a junior high school principal. NAACP, by the way, had to sue my home county for my father to be allowed to be a principal, because they had kept, you could be an assistant principal in my home county, but if you're a Negro, you couldn't become a so the NAACP had to come in. Then they gave my father the worst junior high school in the county, and of course he turned it into the best. All right? So that's what I grew up with. And then you got a lot of African Americans who grew up with dads like that. We always hear the stories of the opposite. That was my father. But that bothered me. It bothered me. I just couldn't, because listen, I was like, yo, Jesus sees all of you. You know, first of all, let's be clear, y'all all going to hell, so. But why only y'all going to jail? I just don't understand. So, you know, and I'm still that way. So I'm just saying, like, I'm a strange kind of liberal in that I didn't grow up on the coast with all this crazy stuff. So I got out of law school. I was 24 years old, and I decided I wanted to, of all things I could do, if I could do something about that. So I graduated. By the way, my father, on his funeral program, my father died in 2008. Hard worker, hard smoker, hard drinker. The smoking got him. 2008. He never got a chance to see President Obama be elected. Never saw me on TV. But in his hospital bed, the two things that would make my father smile: seeing my firstborn son, no matter what you bring him in, no matter how many tubes or whatever, my firstborn, you see him smile. And then looking up from the hospital bed, seeing that Barack Obama run for president. He would see that, that would make him smile. But he never saw him cross the finish line, never saw me do any things I've done in the intervening almost 10 years. But, you know, when he died on the funeral program, the picture my mother wanted us to use, and which we did use, was him the day I graduated from Yale Law School, standing in front of that building like this here. You know, big smile. We don't have any pictures of Willie Jones smiling, but he was smiling that day. So we put that on the cover. So I worked very hard in California to deal with the problem. And when I was in my early 20s, as most of you know, I was on the left side of Pluto. I was known as a young, angry leftist in the Bay Area. You have to work hard to stand out as a liberal in the Bay Area. You gotta work late nights and the weekends, get up early. If you were in Berkeley, California, in San Francisco and Oakland, they say, that guy is a liberal. You are a liberal. So I was as left could be, because I was angry. Because I saw that whole generation of my peers, and again, my peers were from the poorest to the richest. And I could see that difference. And it made me very, very angry. And I've never denied that or apologized for that, because a lot of young people around the world and throughout history, that's where we got to change this comes from in a society. Now, you may come up with dumb ideas or go in the wrong direction. But over time, I figured out ways to be more effective. We created a not-for-profit organization called the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. Nobody knows Ella Jo Baker. Well, you do. She's like, I know. You a leader. You're supposed to know. But they don't teach about, they teach about Dr. King. They don't teach about Ella Jo Baker. They don't teach about Fannie Lou Hamer. They don't teach about Shirley Chisholm. They don't teach about the women who, they'll tell you, Rosa Parks' feet was tired, something crazy. And by the way, if they ever tell you that, young man, and since you came here, you should learn something. Rosa Parks, you heard of Rosa Parks? The whole bus thing? He's very smart. At the time, African Americans were so put down and the dominant group was so up here that they had to be a little sneaky to get things done. So at the time they put out this thing where she was just a seamstress. You heard that, seamstress? Have you ever actually met a seamstress? Yeah, see, it doesn't even make sense to tell kids this stuff. It's like, she was a seamstress. They don't even know what that means. Like, is that an app? I don't know. So she's this seamstress, this modest, humble seamstress who was sitting on the bus, and they told her to get up, and she just said, "My feet is tired." And then she just somehow wound up in jail, and all of a sudden, the entire community was organized. Does that sound plausible to you? I mean, here's the truth. She was an organizer. Now see, at that time, the NAACP, which then was called the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, we now call it the National Association for the Advancement of Certain People, but that's a different story. So there's class tensions in the black community. But at that time, it was banned. Being in the NAACP was like being in the ANC in South Africa. It was illegal. If they found out you were in that organization, you would go to jail. She wasn't just a member of the NAACP. She was the secretary of the NAACP. Now, for that chapter. Now, because of the way that women were put down, she wasn't called the president, because that had to be a dude, because people had brain damage in those days. But the fact that she was the secretary meant she was a major, major, major leader. Not just somebody with tired feet, a leader who, the summer before, had been in a place called the Highland Institute in Tennessee, where I'm from, studying and learning how to do exactly what she did. Okay? So this is a trained, disciplined, intelligent, activist, organizer, leader. She didn't get arrested. She got herself arrested. There's a difference. Now, you should do neither, because you're a 10. But I don't want people giving you bad history because you're going to be smarter than the rest of us in about a half an hour. So she got herself arrested. And then the women in the organization and the women in the community organized the entire city to stay off the buses. And because people had brain damage at that time, they were sexist. They believed men had to be in charge of everything, even though men never get anything done on their own. They said, well, we have to get somebody. They said, well, who's the most worthless, easily manipulated, newest preacher around here? That this thing doesn't go well. If he gets booted out of town, it won't matter because he's a nobody anyway. What about that 24-year-old kid whose dad is famous? Martin Luther King Sr.'s son. Right? Why do we call him Martin Luther King Jr.? Because his dad was famous. There was Martin Luther King, Daddy King, in Atlanta, who was famous, who was a big deal, who had this little runt son, who had been sent off to Montgomery to get good enough to come back home. 24-year-old kid. So I said, let's go get that kid. And we'll push him up in front All the other big ministers who actually know what they're doing have real power. They would fight too much if we grabbed one of the big ones. So we'll let a little one go. Be like, we grabbed you and put you up here. See, then we would all look at you. Oh, you're so little. We cute. We like you. And that's who Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was. But here's what happened. When they pushed that young man up to the front, he was ready. Since he was your age, he had been reading. Since he was your age, he'd been doing his homework. Since he was your age, he'd been watching the adults. And he'd been excelling, he'd been excelling, he'd been excelling. And even though nobody knew it but him, when they pushed him up in front of that microphone and he began to speak, the poetry and the love in his heart just came through and it surprised everybody, including him. And that's how he got started. But he didn't get started by himself. It's the women, the adults, other people put him in that position. Same as happening to you right now. And so we named this thing the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. And we used that as a platform to organize. And we closed 5 youth prisons in California. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And we cut California's youth prison population by 80% with no increase in youth crime or youth violence. And I figured if we could do it for young people in California, we could do it across the country. So that's what I'm working on now.
Van's a lot like me. You just wind him up and let him go. You know, Van, it really feels to me like we're in the middle of a historic moment in time right now.
Yeah.
You mentioned 1968. I'm old enough to have lived through 1968 and have a few memories from that time. Yeah. But these last 3-4 years, the momentum around this country is increasing. There's new attention being paid to our criminal justice system. We talk about that pendulum swinging. It got all the way over here. Yeah. But I feel it coming back. Could you address the moment that we're in?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I wound up having a TV show on CNN called Crossfire with a guy named Newt Gingrich. Why do people always laugh when I say that? I'm gonna tell you something. I can't say enough positive things about Newt. It's going to shock a lot of people. First of all, when I got out of law school in '93, he took over the Congress in '94, and I thought the world had come to an end. This is the worst human ever born, and oh my God, and how are we going to stop this guy? So I actually got all of his books and his writings, and he had this organization called GoPack. I got all that information, because I believe in studying hard. I believe in paying attention in class and doing my homework and doing more than my homework. My dad is Willie Anthony Jones. He's famous, just not here. So, I was very impressed with Newt. This guy is disciplined. He's smart. He's got a strategy. He's able to achieve a lot of things. And so when they put us together for the show, to see if you have to have a certain amount of tension, but it has to be some chemistry too. And they weren't sure if the show would work. So so he was there. He had all his people already. I came in. I walked right over to him. I looked him right in the eye. I said, Mr. Speaker, I want you to know something. I guarantee you, I am the only person in this country, including your wife, who's read all your books. So, he goes, that's probably true. So, and we honestly, we fought on every issue. We didn't agree on anything until we got to this issue of prisons. And we're going to do a show on it, and I kind of laid out my arguments. I was waiting for his counter arguments so we could kind of design the show. And he said that, I agree with everything you just said. I said, what? He goes, in fact, I don't think that you're making the case strongly enough. He said, as a conservative, we see it even in stronger terms. He says, well, what I see is you have a big failed government bureaucracy now this incarceration industry. It's become a big failed government bureaucracy. It's starting to get bigger because it's not working. The worst job this prison system does. You bring people in, you send them home damaged, they come back the next day with their best friend, nobody gets fired. In fact, they might get a bigger budget. Oh, now we're overcrowded. He says, we're not for big failed government bureaucracies that get bigger by doing a bad job. Number one, he said. Number two, from a libertarian point of view, from a liberties point of view, we believe in limited government and individual liberties. He says that this does not seem to be an instance when you now have a prison population bigger than the prison population in China and still growing. And our country is barely a quarter of China's size, and we have more prisoners there. I don't think we're that much worse than Chinese people. And then he said, as a Christian, as a conservative Christian, if every soul matters, where's the redemption? People leave a physical prison, they go into a social prison. They can't get a job, they can't vote, they can't get an apartment, they can't get a student loan. He goes, where's the redemption? As a Christian, he says, so I think you're not making a strong enough case. That was the one show we went out, we actually didn't debate at all. And afterwards I said, we should have this conversation in public. I mean, it's fine to be on TV for 5 or 10 minutes, but we should have this conversation in public. And he says, you know what? If we get 100 leaders together in Washington, D.C., because Newt's a genius. So if we get 100 bipartisan leaders together in Washington, D.C., we can change this whole dynamic. So we set out to do that, and we failed. We did not get 100 bipartisan leaders. We got 700 bipartisan leaders, including 10 congresspeople, 3 governors, 2 cabinet secretaries, and President Obama sent a video. This is all March of last year, about a year ago. And we were stunned. It was almost like people were so hungry to cooperate across partisan lines. And we also, it turned out, it wasn't the usual bipartisan cold oatmeal. Because usually bipartisanship means the weakest Democrats and the weakest Republicans get together to do the weakest bill. This was strong Democrats like myself. Now, this isn't a nonpartisan gathering, but just as self-identification, you may have noticed I'm a Democrat. And strong Republicans like Newt Gingrich, in case you haven't looked him up. So very strong Republicans, very strong Democrats trying to do something very strong. And we got real legislation put forward to this point about a new era. And then I'll talk about other things. First of all, I call it hell. Heck. I call it heck. Sorry. Sometimes if you have one set of friends and they all run together, there's another set of friends, they always run together, and these two sets don't like each other, you may notice that if you try to make friends with somebody in that other group, which is a good thing, people in your group will get mad at you. And it actually takes more courage and more character on your part to say, no, I'm going to be friends with anybody I can because we need to have more friends, not more enemies. See? We need to have more people getting along, not more people talking bad about each other. Okay? It takes courage and character to do that. And that doesn't stop when you get old. All right? So in D.C., you have a gang called the Republicans, you have a gang called Democrats. And if you try to make friends in a rival gang, you might get jumped in your gang. Ask me how I know. So people said, Van, how can you be working with Newt Gingrich? How can you be working with Koch Industries and the Koch brothers and all these different people? And I said, well, hold on a second. Don't be mad at me. I said, first of all, I've never met anybody in prison who said, I want to get out of prison, but I hope the Republicans don't help. I never had that conversation. I want my child out of jail. I want my mom and dad to come home from prison, But I sure hope that the Koch brothers don't help me. I'd rather just stay in jail. So the minute you come at me with that, I know you're not directly impacted. You're just in your little liberal comfort zone, your little NPR bubble bath. Oh, I'm going to tell it. And you mad at me because I'm not in there with you, but I'm trying to get folk home. I'm trying to get folk home. If you go to Washington, D.C., you might notice Democrats don't run the House or the Senate. How can you pass a bill with only Democrats? If you walk around the United States of America, the Republicans have 30 state houses. And if you're going to be honest, and you know what, I tell you what, you have ideologues and extremists on both sides. Be honest now. How many jails and prisons has Jerry Brown closed in California? No. Not one. What about Rick Perry in Texas? He's closed 3. Huh? What about Kasich running for office in Ohio? Did a big reform there. All the stuff we're talking about, he's not talking about, he's already done it and moved on. What about a deal in Georgia? Got 100%, Republican, hardcore right-winger. Got 100% of the state legislature in Georgia. Democrats and Republicans to vote for a bill that cut their population by 10%, saved them $20 million and kept going and brought crime down doing it. Rick Perry, the same thing. If you're going to be honest, Republicans are doing more on the issue than Democrats. Governors. Now, you don't like me saying it, but at some point, shouldn't facts matter? So, you know, I get in trouble on TV because I just say it how I feel it. I'm not censored. I'm not scripted. You may have noticed that. So, and then they were catching heck on their side. How can you work with Van Jones? He's a this-ism and that-ism and whatever, blah, blah, blah. You know, going back to when I was 22 years old to try to defy me at 47. You know, same thing we're dealing with the folks coming home from prison. Going to define somebody at 50 by what they did when they were 20. And nobody in here is the same today they were 2 years ago. So I said, screw it, we got to keep fighting. And guess what happened? 4 miracles happened one day in August and nobody even noticed. President Obama decided to go and visit a prison. Now, that's never been done. The sitting president's never gone to a federal prison in the history of the republic. So that's a miracle right there, just the fact that the president would feel moved to do that. I don't care if you're black, white, purple, Smurf. If you're president going to visit prisoners, God bless you. And that's a miracle. Second miracle, he comes out. Hallelujah! Because you know somebody was like, click, click, click! Third miracle. When he addressed the cameras, he didn't say, well, kids, you know, this is what happens to you. If you do the crime, you do the time. And if you want to stay out of places like this, pull your pants up and stay out of trouble. Walk off. That's what it's supposed to say. That's the safe thing to say. Because, you know, there's economic theory, it's been proven. If black kids pull their pants up, jobs fall down from the heavens, you know. So it must be, they say it on TV all the time. So he didn't say that. He said, there but for the grace of God, go I. He said, I did dumb stuff when I was a kid, but I had some adults that intervened and took care of me. But therefore, for the grace of God and fortunate parenting, I could have been one of these people. Now, hold on a second now. Stop, full pause, wait, hold on. Love him or hate him, this is the most powerful man in the world. For him to say, that he could have been just like one of these little black kids behind these bars, but for a few lucky things, that tells you something. That should really get your attention. That maybe we're missing maybe we're throwing away a lot of genius. Maybe there's something worth trying to save and salvage. But those three little miracles are nothing compared to the fourth miracle. After he went in, after he came out, after he spoke the way that he did, not one major Republican or conservative leader in the country attacked him. Not one. Not one. Now you think about that. Mr. Rush Limbaugh did not attack him for that. Mr. Sean Hannity did not attack him for that. Miss Ann Coulter, you go down the whole list. The people in government, complete silence. This is a president, by the way. If he gave a speech in which he said, kittens are cute, would be attacked the next day on the fuzzy station, the president hates puppies, you know? So, I mean, this is not a president, you know, that's been giving a real pass by his opponents. But on this issue, not one peep. Now that lets you know something. What it lets you know is that this is a new moment. Doesn't mean you can pass bills easily. Doesn't mean it's going. I'm not saying that the fight's over, but I'm saying that sometimes you have to win the moral victory before you can win the political victory. Both political parties have deeply held values. They're being violated every day by mass incarceration. The Republicans, at their best, believe in limited government, individual liberty. That's being run over every day. When you're putting this many people in prison, mostly poor folk, but you put this many people in prison for all kind of stuff. What's the limited government in that? Democrats, at their best, at our best, believe in justice. Don't let some little poor group get messed over just because they're little and can't defend themselves. Well, mass incarceration puts, it's better in the country now to be rich and guilty than poor and innocent. Much better. If you could draw the straw, rich and guilty, poor and innocent, if you want to go with the numbers. So where's liberty? Where's justice? Where's liberty and justice for all? It's not strong in the country anymore the way it used to be, the way it's supposed to be. And so that's why I think we have a real chance. And that's why I think that the liberals, because I bet there might be some liberals in here, or you might know some, need to get off the high horse, get off the self-righteousness. If there's some people, not you, but maybe somebody sitting next to you, there's somebody. See how I did that? There are some liberals who are almost addicted to a sense of moral superiority over conservatives and almost have to believe that conservatives are evil or dumb or mean. And they're more committed to holding on to that little security blanket of self-esteem, cheap self-esteem, than getting something done in the country. And if I have any influence at all with my fellow progressives, I just beg you to put the people in prison first. They're not in there talking about Democrats and Republicans. They're in there talking about recovery. They're in there talking about skills, trades, jobs, how can I get out? Or they're not talking about anything. They're watching the damn Kardashians or something. But either way, they're not talking about this stuff. And we need to be in a position, I think, to go the extra mile to make it possible for the whole country to unite on this.
Van, I took the opportunity during the introductions to introduce one of my old clients who's been to prison, who's here this evening. When I went to your conference in Jacksonville, I met a man named Shaka Senghor. Maybe not everyone here in the audience is familiar with Shaka's story. Would you mind talking about him for a moment?
Yeah, and if you haven't heard of Shaka, you will. It's probably the most important voice, has a chance. I would bet money will be one of the most important voices of this century on this issue. And by the way, since we all have these little devices, before we go, you have the opportunity to pre-order his book, which Oprah Winfrey has just endorsed. Shaka was convicted of a violent crime that he did commit. Let's start with that. Okay. We love the Innocence Project and all the people who are in jail, who are being released from jail, who should have never have been in jail according to our rules and values and morals. That's important. But there are some people who have done some things. And Shaka is one of those people. Shaka he's an African American. You can probably tell by the name.
Link.
I didn't even have to say that, did I? But in case you missed the memo, Shaka Senghor, African American, member of a gang, living in Detroit, selling drugs. He had fled his home because of some of the emotional and psychological and other forms of abuse being heaped upon him in his home. He fled his home. You didn't take him in, I didn't take him in. The gangs are always recruiting. The gangs always have a job opening. The gangs always have an internship. So he wound up in a gang, chose to be in a gang, got shot, and a few weeks later shot someone else. The person he shot died. Shaka Senghor went to prison, second-degree murder, 19 years, 7 years in solitary confinement. Now look, I'm gonna tell you right now, anybody ever here, anybody fly on planes in this room? Think about a long plane flight. And how antsy you get. And you know it's going to land in 3 hours or 4 hours or 10 hours if you're going to Dubai, but whatever it is. You hear her? Are you the mayor? I love you wherever you are. I'm going to tell you that right now. She said, actually, it's 15 hours, sir. Just got back, thank you. Carry on with your story about Dubai. Just got some property there. Anyway, love you. But think about how fidgety you get in just a 3, 4, 5, 10, 15-hour flight. Can imagine a day, a week, a month, a year. We have that happening in the United States right now, and not much bigger than this right here. Most people go completely insane after just like a couple weeks. I mean, you just can't take it. The human mind just begins to break down. And we have people, he did a total, all combined, 7 years in solitary because he was just that non-compliant a prisoner, but also that much of a leader. The other thing that happens, at that street level, the entrepreneurs rise up inside the gang structure, not inside your internship, inside a gang structure, they wind up going to prison. So you got your entrepreneurs in prison. Then in the prison, if you have leadership, you wind up being the leader of a prison gang. They put you in solitary because you got too much influence on the yard. Wasted genius. The same psychological profile that if you put that kid on this side of the street and put him at Yale, winds up running a corporation, on this side winds up running a prison running a gang in prison and winds up in solitary. That's shocking. This is a brilliant brother. But he's sitting there in solitary confinement, angry, and gets a letter from his son, who in the intervening years has grown up a little bit and now understands his father is in prison for murder. And that little boy writes a letter to his dad. Dad, I know what you did. You killed somebody. Killing is wrong. Jesus watches what you do. Don't do that again. And Shaka, sitting in this little thing, waiting for any communication with the world, gets a bomb dropped on him by his own child. Now, a lot of people would have been angry or would have been fallen into more despair. Shaka decided in an instant he's not going to be known only for the worst thing he ever did. And he fights to get books into his cell. And he fights and he designs his life so that every hour is like being in a university. And he studies the classics and he basically educates himself inside the cell. I could tell you 1,000 more stories. Bottom line, Shaka is right now a fellow at MIT. A fellow at MIT. Right now, Shaka's TED Talk, if you don't know what that is, look it up. But his TED Talk last year was one of the top 5 TED Talks in the world. If you stand up and give a TED Talk, they put it on the internet. If 50,000 people watch it, that's a huge success. 100,000 people watch it, they say, oh my goodness. 1.6 million people have watched Shaka's TED Talk about his experience. He wrote a memoir called Righting My Wrongs. Righting My Wrongs. Nobody would publish his memoir because he's a murderer. When he first got out of jail, nobody would give him a job because he's a murderer. He couldn't have an apartment, he's a murderer. Couldn't get a student loan, he's a murderer. But he had made a promise to himself he would never go back. And he almost wound up homeless. But through a series of miracles, he was able to stay out of trouble. He was able to get a little bit of help and support. And he wrote a memoir that nobody would publish. We're not going to publish a book for a murderer. He self-published the book. Then he put the book in the hands of an African-American woman he met. Didn't know that woman worked for Oprah Winfrey. This woman then takes the book to Oprah's house, says, Oprah, you have to read this book. Oprah says, what's the book about? She said, a murder? I don't want this book. Please, Oprah. No. Oprah says she took the book. She wanted to throw it in the garbage can, but someone let her. She said she moved that book to 5 different places in her house. Finally sat down and read it. Called him. Said, come to my house. Come to my house. They sat down and did an interview. Oprah Winfrey is one of the best in the world. See, I said one of just to piss you off. Oprah Winfrey, the best in the world, the best interview in the history of the world. Usually interviews people for 22 to 24 minutes. She's just, no second takes, done. They talk for 2 hours. In the August issue of O Magazine, she wrote, my interview with Shaka Senghor was not one of the top 5 interviews I've ever done. She's done 3,382 interviews. Not one of my top 5 interviews. She says one of the top 5 conversations I've ever had with any human being in my life. And she's had a few conversations. Oprah Winfrey. Again, somebody in solitary confinement 5 years ago. She made sure that his book was republished. It's coming out in 2 weeks on a big publishing house with her support. That interview, which she refused to release, she said, I'm not going to release the interview until one of these big publishers publishes this book. I don't even want anybody, I don't want to have a conversation. Can you imagine walking to a publisher saying, well, the only way I can get this book published is the only way I can get Oprah to talk about my book is if you publish it. It's called a slam dunk in publishing. Okay? So his book comes out in 2 weeks. The reason I think his story is so important is because if he were to come in here and sit down and talk for a minute, less than a minute, your whole mind would change. We don't have throwaway people. We certainly don't have throwaway children. And we have no idea how much genius is entombed in our country. Scientific genius, moral genius, technological genius, entombed. Doesn't mean there aren't bad guys out there. Look, my dad was a cop in the military. His little brother, who he put through college, just retired from the Memphis City Police Force. So I'm a law enforcement kid. I get it. There's people, and listen, as much as everybody wants to march around, Black Lives Matter, blah, 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 we mad at the cops, as soon as something jump off, police! Okay? Let's be real. These liberal conferences, they sit up there, all they do is say bad stuff about the cops, but if somebody were to steal somebody's purse, the first thing they would do is call the cops. So we have to have some balance in reality here. Yes, of course. But back to my main point when I first started. But what do we know works? What does the data say? Huh? What does the science say? What does the brain science say? Okay? How can we use all of these new tools to actually prevent crime and help people who've made those mistakes learn quickly and get back out here and be productive, as opposed to we're just going to entomb a bunch of people to the tune of $80 billion a year? What community could you not fix with $80 billion? One of the last thing I want to say, because Shaka is so important to me. I love this brother so much. And I want you guys, those of you who have these little things, please pre-order his book before we leave here. Pre-order his book, because we need to see some bestsellers from people who have been through this. If you talk about them, you get a bestseller. But if you are them, you can't get published. That's not right. That's not right. So we can fix that. But when you're talking about a kid from a poor community who's sitting in a classroom we're not willing to spend $1,500 a year on, get mad if we have to spend $2,500 a year on, sitting in a classroom. Computers don't work, sitting in the classroom. 36 kids in the classroom, 6 books, no chalk, no computer, overworked teacher. When he's sitting behind a desk, But if she gets up, or he gets up and punches the teacher, you're going to put that kid in the best squad car, take him to a facility with high-tech everything, and spend $50,000 to $100,000 per year per kid. Now, wait a minute. You can spend $50,000 to $100,000 per year per kid locked up. And then 80% of the time, the kid gets in trouble again anyway. So you're running $80,000 a year prep schools for adult prison. And you wonder why nothing works. Now, I would say, in closing, can you imagine one black grandmama with one kid and $100,000? That kid would never get in trouble again. First of all, she would say, well, baby, let's talk about it. In Europe. I'll drive you there in your new car to the airport. Just don't get in trouble, and at the end of the year, I'll give you 50 and I'll keep 50. I mean, there's no way that you can spend $100,000 on a kid and have the kid be in worse shape unless you never plan to help the kid in the first place. And that's what we got to change.
Van, I have one more question for you, but before I ask it, I believe we distributed some note cards to our members of the audience, and if any of you had a question for Van that you had written down, pass it to the aisle, please, and I'll ask one of my volunteers to collect those. Bring it on up.
And in the meantime, what's his name with the red, with the orange? Hey. What's your name? Josh? How old are you? 16. First of all, give him a round of applause for coming. Because you are youth. What made you come? Did that man make you come? Kind of? Yeah. And how did he trick you into coming? What did he say was going to happen? Just wanted you to come?
I told him I'd take him out to dinner after.
Yeah, I knew it was a trick. I knew it was, anytime you got a good mentor, a good elder, they got to trick you. I remember.
By the way, Van, that's my friend Ed James, who's running for the Florida House of Representatives, sitting right there.
Stand up, man. Yeah. This is a nonpartisan event, but I tell you, a lot of people talk about our kids. They don't talk to our kids. They don't talk with our kids. And so anyway, Josh, I just want you to know, it means a lot to me that you're here. You know, you probably know some of the folks in these situations I'm talking about, or at least you heard about them. You know, my view is a lot of these problems are going to be solved by people between your age and his age. And we could put you up here and you would probably blow folks' minds just what's going on in the culture. What's going on when you're doing this? That people here have no idea. They have no idea the pressure that you're under. They have no idea the kind of things that you already are thinking about and having to deal with at a young age. But the fact that you're here tonight and not someplace else, either doing nothing or doing something bad, means a lot to me. So give Josh another round of applause for being here.
Van, you're not all talk. You're a little bit of action as well.
A little bit.
Why don't you talk a little bit about Cut 50 and the Operation Reform Conference that we had in November. And what I'm hoping to do is start these similar kind of conversations here in the Sarasota community. So maybe we can inspire our folks a little bit along those lines.
Just real briefly, we've discovered, so listen, I'm on TV, I'm a commentator at CNN, but that's just what I do. That's, you know, people can see easily in an airport or something like that. But I actually work for a not-for-profit incubator called the Dream Corps, which some friends and I helped to get started to try to accelerate some of these different causes. And the Dream Corps has Green for All, trying to get solar panels into low-income communities. The Dream Corps has Yes We Code. We work with Twitter. We work with Lyft. We work with Pinterest. We work with Salesforce to get young people of color, mainly, who often are left out of the technology field, that don't know they can be in it, to get them jobs and training. But we also run something called Cut 50, hashtag Cut 50. And it's a campaign to cut the prison population in half over the next 10 years, safely, smartly, using bipartisan solutions that are already working across the country, just not at scale. And so we launched that last year at that March summit I was telling you about that me and Newt Gingrich put together, Newt Gingrich and I put together. And it's just been an amazing process. Some of the things that we've done 4 bipartisan summits, including one here in Florida, 1 in Iowa, 2 in Washington, D.C. Every time we've done one, it's been amazing how much we've been able to accelerate the change process. People just don't know. Everybody feels like they're by themselves. They're the only one that sees this problem. They're the only one that cares. They're the only one with their little program. Republicans and Democrats. You got some good Republican mayors in Florida. They see these problems every day. They're trying to solve them. They don't know that they could have so much support. So just gathering and just talking is so important, number one. Number two, we have 100+ A-list celebrities that have signed on to try to help move this thing forward. Alicia Keys came to Congress with us. Just did a beautiful job convincing staffers to take this issue up in the Senate. Helped us when the Senate was about to back away to stay in the fight. We may get a bill done. But then the last thing is just keeping this web of friendship going. You meet good people, and it's amazing how, and you guys have seen this in your own life, but sometimes somebody you met a year ago, and you didn't even know why you met them, they become incredibly important to you in a moment, or you become important to them in a moment. And we have to be able to weave that fabric of community. They say it takes a village, but no, we don't live in villages. What we have is we don't have a diverse country. We have bubbles that touch. That's not diversity. Bubbles that touch. That's not diversity. And so we've got to bust those bubbles, and convenings are a great way to do that.
So I've got some great questions from the audience. One I'm going to field. One of the questions was, is this being recorded? And the answer is yes. My friend Charles Clapsaddle from METV is here recording the event. Give Charles a round of applause. Charles and METV do so much for this community, and they are always out here at events when we need them. So thank you, Charles.
I really appreciate that. I especially appreciate you recording me saying how much I love Jeff Zucker, my boss. My boss is CNN. Don't edit that out.
So Van, there's a common theme that runs through a lot of these questions, and it's about addiction, mental health, and brain injury, and the roles that those are playing in our incarceration problem. These are big topics, but I think our folks would like to hear you address some of that. And what kind of strategies can we employ as a society to tackle these?
Can I be bitter for a moment? We all friends here. Could I just be bitter for a moment? You know, I have to cover the presidential, and so in New Hampshire and in Iowa, the media and the political elite discovered something called addiction. And everybody from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump and everybody in the middle, opioid addiction is so terrible, and this heroin epidemic is so terrible, and we have to have some new treatments, and we have to deal with this. It's a medical emergency. Oh my God! Let's not punish anyone for this. It's a mental health problem, and we. And I'm like, look, I'm not trying to be rude. But how come y'all not sending the SWAT team in here? Kicking in doors, blowing doors off hinges, dragging people out in their underwear. The last time we had a big addiction, it was cocaine in crack form, and it was poor black folk, and nobody said anything about mental health. They didn't say anything about no treatment. They said, y'all have a tremendous moral failure, which can be fixed by massive amounts of violence against you. There was no discussion, there was no crying, there was no wringing of the hands, there was no presidential candidates running around trying to hold no crack babies. I mean, no, and there should have been. Babies being born massively injured by an epidemic, a medical addiction epidemic. Babies being born became a punchline and became an attack line and not a helpline. That wasn't in 1813. That was 20 years ago. The same Hillary Clinton, God bless Hillary Clinton, but the same Hillary Clinton that's talking about mental health and all this help and support and crying all these tears was talking about super predators in the 90s. So I have to say this because when you wonder why black folk be mad, and that's Ebonics. That was not incorrect. That's not incorrect. Black folk be mad, okay? See, black people, Ebonics, we have a different tense. I'm not joking. It's called the persistent tense. See, past, we were mad. Present, we are mad. Future, We're going to be mad. Persistent, we be mad. We be mad then, we be mad today, and we be mad because this don't make no sense. Are we all people or not? Are we all people or not? Are we all people or not? If we're all people, then all those people who are in prison right now, all those families who are wrecked right now, by massively militarizing the response to the last epidemic should come home, or send in, let's see it with white folks now. Send in that military response. Send in those SWAT teams. Blow those doors off the hinges. Terrorize those children. Drag those people out in their underwear. Put them in prison for 20 years, 30 years for nonviolent drug offenses. You can't even imagine it. You say, why would you do that? That would just make things worse. You think? You think? And the same people who could not imagine doing to Iowa and New Hampshire what was done to Compton and South Central Los Angeles, can't imagine it, will then turn right around and blame all those people in those communities. Why don't they do better? What's wrong with those people? Because it's when you make a mistake. Did I say if? I hope I didn't say if. I think I said when. When you make a mistake, it's what you do and what society does that determines the outcome. Okay? You make a mistake. Now listen, I already told you. I don't mess with none of it. So you're not talking to somebody, I'm shocked other people can tell. I'm coming from somebody who literally has never had a beer. Okay, so please know, I'm anti-drug. I'm anti-drug war too. Because first of all, don't put my Uncle Milton on the front lines of a war that he can't win as a police officer. That's not fair to him. You're sending my Uncle Milton all in these crazy situations, and all he has is a flashlight and a gun and a baton. He didn't create that situation. And he's had to see horrible things. And my Uncle Milton will tell you, he's a police officer just retired, with every honor you can get, he'll tell you, he would have much rather seen the money spent on things that would have helped, rather than putting him up against that furnace every day. Okay, so it's not fair to our law enforcement. It's not fair to anybody. But you will watch what happens now. So I say this to say that I have to fight against the bitterness every day. I have to say, you know what, hallelujah, God is good. Let us, I am a Christian now. Don't forget, I'm a leftist Christian. You figure that out. So now that we might have some more empathy, maybe we have some more wisdom, because we know now an awful lot about the way addiction works. And we know that taking somebody and further traumatizing them and further brutalizing them and not having available resources does not make the drug problem better, it makes it worse at the individual societal level. I would love for us to have a movement called empathy. See, that might be too big a word for some people, but I like that word because when you talk about racism and anti-racism and all this, I think for a lot of people that becomes a very uncomfortable conversation very quickly. And they just don't have, it takes a certain amount of resilience emotionally to even have that conversation on both sides. But empathy is something different. Everybody knows that we need to be more empathetic, and most of us feel like we don't have, if somebody says, listen, you're not listening to me, take a walk in my shoes. That's less threatening than to say, well, you're a moral failure because you hate all black people. That's what, when we say we see racism in the system, what a lot of white people hear is you're saying I'm a racist and I hate black people. You're saying every police officer is a racist, they hate all the black people. Every judge, every jury hate the black people. And if that's either true or false, if it's true, I should shoot myself in the head. If it's false, you should quit lying. And either way, since I'm not likely to shoot myself, I'm probably going to say stop lying. And we don't have a conversation. And we are saying the same thing. And I go on TV every time they shoot somebody, and this thing, it's always me and some white cop. We have to argue with each other. And I was like, man, It's a tough way to make a living. So I would like for us to get to a better place. And the thing I think that's most missing is empathy. It's just really thinking about this from the point of view of what if this was your child? What if this was your child? I've never met anybody who said that if their child wound up on drugs, the first thing they should do is put them in jail for 15 years. I've never met anybody say, my child's on drugs? Oh, good. I think the best thing to do for my child is to put that child in jail for 17 years. Well, then why are we doing it to this other person's child? So that, to me, is the heart of it. And now, there are smarter people than I am to really understand all of the smartest programs, the best ways to go. But what I think that the rest of us who are not as smart as those people have to do is to create a political comfort zone and protection zone for people who are going to be in office to speak this way. When you are elected, I don't want you to be considered some weirdo for caring about these issues, or have to worry if they're going to run an attack ad against me because I care about these issues. We should just make it, even more than it is now, common sense. Common sense. Of course you're not going to waste a bunch of money and a bunch of lives when we know that very simple, very inexpensive interventions can get people their lives back and get them back out there creating businesses and paying taxes and raising children. And of course, that's the right way to go. So let's be science-based, let's be data-driven, let's be cost-sensitive, let's be humane, and let's wrap that all up inside of empathy for each other, because everybody makes mistakes.
I wanted to ask you, there was one tough question in here.
Okay, good. Ask. I love the tough ones.
Well, what about guns?
Mm-hmm.
So we have this situation in our country, gun crime, guns on the streets, gun control. Any thoughts, any strategies for us to think about?
Look, I'm a Christian, Southern, red state public school kid, so my view is not going to be the same as the liberal elites in my party on either coast. I would love for there to be the gun show loopholes and all these different things. I don't think it's going to make the difference that we pretend. So if somebody says, hey, should we have this loophole closed and this background check and this thing and that thing? Yes, 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 yes. And if you listen to law enforcement, frankly, they'll tell you, yes, all that stuff would be very, very helpful. But, you know, something is wrong, deeper than just that. And I don't know if government has the tools to solve what's wrong. There's something really wrong with our culture. There's something really wrong. We have gotten so spiritually, I didn't say religiously. That's the religion, that's just the building you go into and where you write your checks to try to stay out of trouble. That's something else. But spiritually, we've just gotten off. You know, and this election has not made it better. I'm not impressed at all. We had a presidential candidate yesterday say he wanted to punch somebody in the face at his own rally, and the media didn't even respond. We are going down, there's a cultural corrosion. If you listen, don't get me started talking about this because I'm a neo-traditionalist as a parent. You know, my dad's Willie Anthony Jones. Y'all know. He's famous. Every parent should be famous in their own house. That should be the #1 influence on your children. I'm a neo-traditionalist. You know, I remember the 70s. I remember when television was a good thing. I remember Good Times and Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and when they were trying to marry Tyler Moore, you know, it might seem boring to people today, but that Little House on the Prairie, that was teaching values. It was funny, it was hip, it was edgy, but it was teaching values. Welcome Back, Carter, all this type of stuff. Then you wind up with this Seinfeld and this where it's just, you know, nihilism, you know, shows about nothing. And now it's the worst the Real Housewives. I ain't never met no Real Housewives that punch people in the face in restaurants. And what is this? You know, and the worse you are, and the more despicable and corrupt you are, it's like that's the better. You be more and more famous. I'm not mentioning no names. I'm not going to talk about the Kardashians. I'm just saying, at a certain point, it doesn't make sense. And so that's this bigger stew where people don't value themselves, let alone other people. And in that, if you dump a bunch of guns, you're going to have a bunch of nonsense going on. But to pretend that the government can come in, the government can't confiscate all these guns, and probably shouldn't try. So you're going to have a bunch of guns. That's just a given. You can try to push down on some of it, that's fine. Whatever the president says, I'm for it. But, you know, I want us to at some point have an honest conversation about what we're doing. These video games and all sort of stuff, I don't mean to sound like Tebrugge, but it has an impact. I look at my own children. You know, if you do something wholesome with them for a couple of hours, you can almost have some peace in the household. You leave them to those screens, and about half an hour, it's just Armageddon. You're like, it's like Al-Qaeda came in and just trained them. You know, I'm like, what y'all doing? So, you know, I want us to be more real. You know what I'm saying? That's one thing that, you know, a guy running for office is, you know, he's maybe authentically, from some people's point of view, authentically crazy, but he's authentic in terms of you don't think that he's just saying what somebody told him to say. And I think the young people in particular can spot a phony at 1,000 yards. I think these young people, if you are just some, you know, get a cereal box and pull your little talking points out of there because some poster told you that, I don't think you're going to get anywhere with these young people. And I think these young people are very sophisticated about reading folks and knowing when they're being manipulated. But there's so much manipulation being fired at them and so much corrosive stuff being dumped on top of them, it's hard for them to find their way. So I think if we can figure out a way to stop firing these cultural bullets at these kids, I think that you might see a little bit less of the violence. Just say one more thing. You know, when you're in a place like in Chicago, I was on the ground in Ferguson. I was on the ground in Charleston for CNN. May I just close with this?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, I was on the ground in Ferguson, and you can argue whether or not the police officer should have been charged or not. That is completely beyond my ability to sort out. But what I do know is I was in Ferguson long enough to see what was going on with those young people. And the night that they decided not to charge the officers, I was there. And it was a couple of hundred, probably like 500, 600 young people standing outside in downtown Ferguson. And Ferguson is about as big as this auditorium. I mean, Ferguson is not no big city. And so they had speakers, like we must have here, all in the street, and hundreds of people out there. And I saw something that I've never seen before, and I hope I never see it again. There was a particular look in the eyes of these young people. If you can imagine a street where it's been a blackout, right? And you can imagine a house, and that house is completely blacked out, along with the whole street. No street like that, but just a blacked out street with a blacked out house. But somebody in the basement lit one candle. Okay? How much light would you be able to see, right? Okay. Not much. but a little bit. That's how much light was in the eyes of all these kids. Just a little bit of hope. Because to them, it wasn't about this particular cop and this particular kid. It's does anybody care about me? Does anybody understand what it means to be stopped every time I go to the store? Every time I go to work, I got to go to work half an hour early because I know I'm going to be stopped. Does anybody care about me? Does anybody get this? Does anybody know what it would mean to see a friend, whether they were right or wrong, whether they shoplifted or not, shot and left outside for 4 hours, and the family standing there screaming, they can't even be allowed to go to the body, and they're bringing out, does anybody care about me? Do I matter? And when the announcement came over the speakers, I watched the lights go out in every one of those kids. I hope I never see that again. These kids need some hope. These kids need some opportunity to show their positives. And for somebody just to clap for them and say, you're doing a good job. That's not the gang members. That's not the negative. And that's, we can talk all we want to about getting, the government to change their policies about this and that or whatever, but until we start doing, what's your name, brother? Ed. Until we start doing what Ed is doing and reaching out to people like Josh. Now, you didn't know what I was going to say. I could have said something crazy. But at least give Josh an opportunity to do something. And you can say, I can't wait to get back home and talk to my friends. But right now, at least he's here. And you, Santino, if we don't start doing this extra parenting, your kids might be grown and gone, but there's a lot of kids out here that need you. And if we don't, and all you need is have one kid in your life, it'll change everything you do. I mean, one kid in your life from the church or from the community center, just one kid. And you going through what? They doing what to school? You what? You swiping what? And you will find the motivation to get out here and use what you know and who you know to make things better. And I tell you what, if we do that, we can start cutting the lights back on for a generation. Let's do that together. Thank you very much. Please, please, please. I assume most of you have Amazon. Maybe some of you have Powell's. Just take a moment and go to Amazon right now. I want you to pre-order this book. This book will change your life. I'm serious. I'm not joking. What's it called? The book is called Righting My Wrongs. But you can just, if you put it in Shaka Senghor, but Righting My Wrongs. Just give me a second. I just need, I'm not going to let you go. I swear I'll go out there. I'll set myself on fire. I just need, this book is so important to me. I'm serious. This book, Oprah said it changed her life. Oprah has read a book. I mean, Oprah said, that's like, we ain't got no more Jesus, but we got Oprah, in America. So, when I see 10 hands that go up that say they ordered the book, then the church will be dismissed. But please, and while you're doing it, I'm going to tell you, watch this young man, Shaka Senghor. You will never have a movement that succeeds based on people who are outside of the community affected. Can you imagine if Cesar Chavez had not been in those fields first? Can you imagine if Dr. King, L. Joe Baker had never been under segregation? Can you imagine any leader leading any cause that hadn't first been through it? This is the first time I've known somebody who's been in that hell and coming out of that hell, not crazy, more sane than me, you, and anybody else I've ever met, who has a chance to be a bestseller, has a chance to have his book in the library, in the bookstores, in the airport. What's that book? If we can just get that book up, if it changed Oprah, it can change anybody. And I tell you what, we have too many leaders who are selling their own books. Right or wrong? Right or wrong? I'm telling you, buy his book. I ain't, I got books. By the way. What am I doing? Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So listen, you will just, when Malcolm X autobiography, that book is still read around the world, isn't it? George Jackson, Michelle Alexander's book is being read around the world. One book, The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander. I've had the honor of knowing her. One book. The whole Black Lives Matter movement is resting on one book, Michelle Alexander, New Jim Crow. I'm telling you, you take all. And Michelle Alexander says this book is better than her book. You read Michelle's book in prison. So now I'm telling you, Michelle says Shaka's book is better than her book. Michelle is blurbing this book. I'm not asking you to buy no sorry book. So can anybody raise their hand who ordered it? Almost there? That looks close to 10? Yeah. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You're free to go. You're free to go.